Picture this. You're speaking with a captivating woman. Sharp eyes, a smile just subtle enough to disarm crowds. And yet, strangely, she doesn't see you as a man trying to impress her, but as something she must be wary of. Not because you're cold, but because you're too grounded to seek validation. We've grown used to the image of men striding, pleasing, performing. But that's not true magnetism. True magnetism radiates from within, from self-command, from emotional discipline, and from a life so inwardly rich that no one can easily pull you off course. That is the spirit of Stoicism. And today we'll explore 10 psychological vulnerabilities in women. Not to manipulate, but to understand, to remain unshaken, and to master oneself in every relationship. 1. The craving to escape emotional dullness. In the depths of human psychology, emotion wields greater power over behavior than reason. For women, attraction in a relationship doesn't arise from logic, numbers, or clear explanations. It stems from feelings that are vivid, novel, unexpected, and profound. Emotion for a woman is not merely a fleeting reaction, but a decisive criterion for whether a man is truly worth her attention, exploration, and attachment. As life becomes increasingly routine, structured by work, duty, and repetitive habits, emotion turns into a rare and precious asset. It's like the light in a room so familiar, no one notices it until it vanishes. That's why the man who stirs a woman's heart need not be perfect. He must simply evoke an emotional experience that breaks from the ordinary. The man who makes her heart race doesn't do so by looks, but by awakening something dormant within her. A primal, yet magnetic sense of being alive, being challenged, and being invited to explore. A common mistake many men make is thinking that the more they show affection, the more attentive and consistent they are, the more likely a woman will be won over. But this only holds true in specific contexts, whereas in most emotional dynamics, being overly safe easily translates into one word: boring. A man who texts every morning, speaks sweetly, checks in like clockwork, may seem ideal, but in reality, he drifts into emotional monotony, lacking any dramatic peak. Emotion cannot be sparked by what is predictable. If a woman can foresee every response you'll have in every situation, then waiting, wondering, and imagining lose their meaning. That is why real allure lies not in the amount of attention given, but in the ability to create emotional contrast. A man who can lead a woman through varying states, from curiosity to suspense, from gentleness to intensity, holds the emotional rhythm of the relationship. He doesn't need to fabricate drama or chaos. He only needs to know when to retreat, when to appear, when to stay silent, and when to speak. These subtle shifts form an ever-changing current of feelings, making her feel like she's stepping into an unfolding, unpredictable journey. In storytelling, what keeps the audience glued to the screen isn't a flawless character, but the tension, surprises timed just right, changes that make the plot compelling. A man of depth knows how to apply the same principle to emotional life. He doesn't lay all of himself bare in just a few encounters. He leaves the other wondering, imagining, questioning. In a relationship, what keeps a woman engaged isn't how much you say, but the sense that you've withheld something worth discovering. To do this, a man must cultivate the ability to generate an emotional field around him, a space where others sense something is happening, even if they can't name it. It might be calmness in his silence, an unreadable glance that holds something back, or his rare but well-timed presence. When you appear at just the right moment, not too often to become ordinary, not too distant to feel absent, you are controlling the intensity of emotion others experience around you. What is remarkable is that women often won't admit they are drawn to uncertainty. But the truth is, it's precisely the vague spaces, the unexplained silences, that engage their minds most powerfully. They begin to ask questions, to think of you, to revisit every small moment. And in doing so, your image expands in their imagination, not because you revealed yourself, but because you didn't. Another vital part of emotional longing is the ability to make others feel truly alive. While most relationships descend into repetition and emotional numbness, men who know how to subtly and intentionally introduce change become a light in that monotony. They can lead others from a constricted mental space to one more expansive, where emotion moves freely, unchained from excessive logic or duty. Magnetic men do not act. They live in alignment with their own depth, with the rhythm of their inner life, and that alone sets them apart. When they tell a story, it's not mere information. It's emotion wrapped in language. When they walk, it's not just movement. It's presence. When they're silent, it isn't emptiness. It's the signal of something deeper stirring within. Thus, escaping dullness doesn't come from trying to be attractive, but from living with such depth that every word, action, and expression carries emotion others long to feel. Such a man doesn't chase attention. He draws it, because no one can quite anticipate what he'll do next. And that very unpredictability, grounded in consistency, is what makes a woman feel as though she's entering an entirely different world. 2. True attraction emerges from firm boundaries. In any relationship, boundaries are not barriers. They are the framework that shapes value, respect, and personal space. For women, attraction arises not only from what a man does, but also from what he refuses to do, from what he won't tolerate, and from the lines he draws, not to oppose others, but to protect himself. Kindness without limits is often mistaken for weakness. A man who always says yes, who is endlessly accommodating, who never objects, quickly loses value in the eyes of others. Without clear boundaries, his actions become predictable, weightless, and unworthy of esteem. Refusal is not always rejection. It is often a sign of self-mastery and personal dignity, qualities that form the essence of true magnetism. In behavioral psychology, people instinctively devalue what is too easily obtained. Conversely, what demands effort, what is limited, becomes far more desirable. In relationships with women, a man who cannot be manipulated, who won't abandon his principles to gain approval, compels a woman to adjust her behavior, instead of the other way around. It is his steadfastness that becomes the anchor in the relationship, a place where she senses she is with someone solid, someone uncued by fleeting emotion. Setting boundaries is not a reactionary act born of pain or disappointment. It is a quiet declaration from someone who knows precisely what is acceptable and what is not. Such a man doesn't need to raise his voice or threaten. He simply lives by principle. And when others cross the line, he steps back, without blame, without begging. That behavior reflects not only emotional control, but a form of inner strength, one that commands respect without demanding it. In practice, Women will sometimes test men, not out of malice, but to see whether he truly stands his ground. These tests might come in the form of unreasonable requests, emotional flare-ups, or behaviors meant to provoke. The weak man will try to appease, or to yield in fear of conflict. The strong man responds deliberately, upholding his standards without making a spectacle. It is this calm presence that brings the testing to a halt, because she knows she cannot sway him with emotion. One of the clearest signs of boundaries is the ability to say no without lengthy justification. When a man knows he cannot or will not do something, he says no calmly. No anger, no defense, no apology. That is the strength of a man who knows what aligns with his values and won't accept what violates them. In today's world, where social media and external validation dominate, maintaining personal boundaries is harder than ever. Everyone wants to be liked, accepted, praised. Yet it is precisely in all this climate that those who can say no to the unworthy stand apart. They are the rare few who don't follow the crowd, don't perform for applause, and don't fear standing alone. Boundaries are also revealed in how a man manages his time and energy. He doesn't spend all day texting. He doesn't abandon work or passions just to please someone. He knows his presence has value, and for that reason, it is not given lightly. When a woman realizes that time with you is not guaranteed, she begins to cherish every moment, because she understands you are not someone to be pulled off course, but someone who must be respected to be let into your world. Furthermore, boundaries are shown in how a man responds to uncertainty in relationships. When rejected, disrespected, or taken for granted, a man with firm limits does not degrade himself to beg for affection. He walks away, not from pride, but from principle. Self-worth is not something to be negotiated to maintain a bond. And it is in that moment that a woman realizes she cannot use her moods to govern you. If she wants to stay, she must meet the standards you've set. Attraction rooted in solid boundaries is not a tactic or temporary strategy. It is the product of disciplined living, where a person learns what matters, what to hold on to, and what to let go of. A man like that doesn't seek to control others. He controls himself, and that alone is enough to shape the world around him. 3. Mystery always. Human beings are naturally drawn to what they do not yet understand. In psychology, this is known as the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency for incomplete experiences, stories, or people to linger longer in the mind. In relationships, mystery is rarely discussed, yet it remains one of the key elements that make someone compelling, especially to women. Mystery is not about forced distance or calculated coldness. It is not about withholding information or trying to be difficult to read. True mystery lies in a man who doesn't reveal all of himself too soon, who leaves spaces that others feel compelled to fill with their imagination. What is left unsaid lingers longer in thought, and it is that very contemplation that lays the foundation for lasting emotional attachment. When a man shares everything at once, his past, emotions, goals, and private thoughts, he inadvertently loses the chance to create depth in the mind of the other. There is nothing left to discover, nothing to wait for, nothing to imagine. The relationship becomes a story already told from the first page. The reader feels no desire to turn to the next. Over-familiarity too soon diminishes attraction, and attraction, at its core, always requires some measure of the unknown. In a conversation, the initial draw is rarely the story itself. It's how you tell it, where you pause, what you withhold, how your eyes react to what remains unsaid. Women are acutely sensitive to emotional subtleties. They don't just hear your words, they perceive what you deliberately or unconsciously leave out. When they sense something moving inside you they cannot name, they begin to ask questions. And when questions arise, the mind begins to bond. The power of mystery lies in its ability to create emotional resonance. When a conversation ends, what makes someone remember you? It isn't clear statements or concrete details. It's the lingering feeling, the sense that they haven't yet understood the whole of you, that there are still layers of thought, feeling, and value left unexplored. This emotional resonance cannot be manufactured through overexposure. It emerges when you are composed enough to withhold a part of yourself, not out of fear, but because you know no one should be granted full access to your soul in mere moments. A man of depth does not need to say much. He doesn't rush to justify his actions, nor explain his emotions at every prompt. He lets others wonder. He doesn't say, "I'm sad," but it's felt in his eyes, in the silence between his words. These undefined signals create the sense that he cannot be understood through simple questioning, and that is what keeps others thinking about him long after he's gone. Mystery also reveals itself in how a man manages his presence. He's not always available, not always present when summoned, and doesn't reply instantly to every message or invitation. Not because he's playing hard to get, but because he lives by schedule, by principle, by his own goals. This limited accessibility doesn't create distance, it creates value. When a woman realizes she can't fully claim your time or attention, she begins to cherish the moments that she has. Another element that preserves mystery is withholding your true feelings about the relationship too soon. When a man says he's ready, that he's certain, that he needs the woman, such certainty, though sincere, can diminish allure. In contrast, when you allow emotion to unfold naturally, unrushed by the pressure to define things, you give the other person room to feel on her own. And it's in that space, in the waiting, the wondering, the hoping, that deeper connection forms, stronger than any premature declaration. In today's world, where everything is easily accessible, information, images, words, mystery becomes a rare luxury. A man who doesn't overshare, who doesn't constantly express emotion, who doesn't seek to impress with words, stands out as an exception worth noticing. Women, often unconsciously, are drawn to the man who does not strive to be fully understood, for it is the feeling of not yet knowing that drives the desire to know more. Ultimately, mystery is not a game. It is the natural expression of a man who has outgrown the need to be instantly understood. When a man lives with purpose, with a world of his own, and does not need to fully expose himself to feel validated, he emanates a quiet, enduring magnetism. And in relationships, it is this silence that echoes the longest, the resonance that lingers in memory without a name. 4. Leadership is not control. It is direction. In relationships, the difference between control and leadership is clear, though at times they may appear similar on the surface. Control often stems from fear of loss, from a need to dictate others' behaviors and emotions to preserve a sense of safety. In contrast, leadership arises from inner stability, from vision and clear direction, where a man does not need others to comply, yet his presence and actions naturally influence those around him. A man with true leadership does not issue demands. He sets standards. He does not impose, but neither does he compromise his values. He does not ask, "What do you want?" but rather says, "I'm doing this because I believe in it." Clarity of purpose and action is what gives a woman a sense of safety, not physical, but spiritual. She knows she's with someone who is not swayed by passing emotions, someone who knows what he wants and where he's going. Women are not looking for someone who constantly asks for their opinion or yields to every wish. They need a man who makes decisions with confidence, with logic, and with direction. Such a man does not probe incessantly or seek emotional cues. He observes, perceives, and acts according to established principles. In a world of uncertainty and chaos, a man who leads becomes a landmark, something others hold on to regain balance. Leadership is not dominance. It is not checking phones, policing friendships, or issuing commands in a relationship. It has nothing to do with surface control. Leadership is the ability to open a path in thought and in action that others want to walk, not because they're forced, but because they're inspired. A man who leads is often one disciplined with himself. He asks nothing of others that he hasn't already demanded of himself. And because of this, his words carry weight, not because they're loud, but because they're grounded in action. In tense or uncertain situations, the man who leads is the one who remains calm. He doesn't deflect responsibility, doesn't blame the circumstances or emotions of others. Instead, he responds with focus, with clarity of priority, and by guiding things back on track. In conflict, he doesn't seek to win. He seeks to understand and resolve. His response in crisis is the clearest evidence of his leadership. An essential aspect of leadership is the ability to set rhythm in the relationship. A man with direction is not pulled by the emotional tides of others. He does not lead emotions through manipulation or control, but through living with inner steadiness, prompting those around him to adjust to his frequency. This rhythm is reflected in how he communicates, when he makes decisions, how he handles conflict, and even how he maintains distance to allow growth for both sides. In practice, leadership is shown in how a man makes choices. Not every decision requires consensus, especially when it falls within personal responsibility. A man who is strong in thought does not hesitate to say, "I will do this at that time," or "This is my plan." A woman may not always agree initially, but it is this steadiness and clarity that give her a sense of safety. When she no longer has to constantly wonder what comes next, she can relax, trust. And from that, the relationship is built on firmer ground. Leadership also requires keen observation. A man does not act at random. He reads the environment, senses others' energy, and chooses a path that fits while staying true to his principles. He does not act to be liked, but because it is the right course in that specific moment. The ability to choose wisely based on reason and context is what earns respect and trust. A non-negotiable part of leadership is consistency. When words and actions diverge, others lose direction. But when a man lives what he speaks, acts by the values he holds, and does not waver under emotional pressure, he creates a magnetic pull, a force that not only draws others in, but makes them want to stay. Leadership is not measured by how much you speak, by how often you prove your strength, but by how you live. In your silence, in your choices, even in your restraint. A man who leads does not need to force influence. He simply walks in the right direction. And that path alone is what compels others to follow. 5. Inner freedom. No one is the center but yourself. One of the clearest signs of inner strength is the ability to remain emotionally and mentally independent, even within intimate relationships. Inner freedom does not come from rejecting connection, but from refusing to place anyone else center of one's life. In a romantic relationship, this is what creates enduring magnetism, for nothing makes another want to stay more than knowing you don't need them to feel whole. In reality, when a man makes a woman the center of his life, even if it comes from goodwill or a desire to show sincerity, it often leads to negative consequences. He begins to adjust his life, change his schedule, abandon his interests, and even halt his goals just to keep the relationship stable. These behaviors, while seemingly acts of love, significantly erode attraction, because the woman no longer feels invited into a rich inner world. She feels pulled into a world lacking direction, a world built on dependence. A man who lives with inner freedom has a life of his own, clear goals and interests that extend beyond the romantic sphere. He doesn't live to please others. He lives to fulfill the values he believes in. And this creates a powerful allure, because no woman wants to be someone's reason for existing. They want to join a journey that already has direction, one that would continue whether or not they are in it. Emotional dependence drains the core masculine energy, an energy rooted in resolve and the ability to remain centered. When a man becomes overly concerned with how others feel, think, or receive, he begins to lose control of his own emotions. Every action becomes a reaction to the external rather than a choice from within. A woman can sense this shift, not through words, but through how he behaves, responds, and adjusts himself to gain approval. By contrast, a man with inner freedom is not shaken by closeness or distance in a relationship. He does not fear abandonment, nor does he strain to hold on. He knows that if a relationship is right, it will grow naturally. If not, he will not betray himself to keep it. This stance doesn't stem from apathy, but from a clear awareness that his worth is not dependent on another's presence or recognition. Inner freedom also means not seeking external validation to feel whole. A self-possessed man doesn't need daily texts, constant praise, or affirming actions from others to know his worth. He feels complete, not because everything is perfect, but because he refuses to let anyone or anything govern his inner state. Another essential trait is the ability to maintain boundaries in a relationship. A man with inner freedom does not tolerate violations just to avoid loss. He is willing to walk away when something conflicts with his values. Without anger, without threats, he simply acts according to his principles. And that very act ensures others cannot take him lightly. They know their place in his life is not guaranteed. Inner freedom does not preclude attachment, but it balances it by preventing attachment from becoming dependence. A man can love deeply, care sincerely, and still not lose himself. He continues learning, pursuing his goals, and protecting his independence, not to push someone away, but because he refuses to shrink himself to keep someone close. When a woman realizes she cannot control or emotionally sway you, she begins to respect you, and that respect becomes the foundation of a mature relationship. In modern life, where emotions are often amplified by social media and romantic ideals, inner freedom becomes a steady anchor. A man of strength is not pulled into comparison, does not measure his worth by fleeting feedback. He filters information, chooses relationships carefully, and above all, he chooses his responses. As a result, he is no longer a product of his environment, but the architect of a life defined by character and composure. The attraction of such a man comes not from appearance, words, or wealth, but from the unmistakable sense that he belongs to no one but himself. He does not force others to love him, nor does he prove his worth. He walks his path, pursues what matters, and it is this unshakable freedom that draws others into his world, not out of obligation, but because they are genuinely inspired. 6. Emotional control. In every storm, in every human interaction, especially in romantic relationships, emotion often takes a center stage. What is spoken, how one reacts, and the demeanor in each moment, all are directly shaped by the state of one's inner emotions. That is why the ability to control emotion is not merely a useful skill, but a foundational element of both attraction and stability in a relationship. A man is often respected not because he is always right, but because he remains calm when everything around him descends into chaos. When tension rises, when others speak in anger, or when emotions are used to test his boundaries, the way he responds becomes the measure of his self-mastery. Controlled silence, a calm voice, or a brief yet deliberate reply, these reveal that he is not ruled by emotion. Negative emotions, anger, jealousy, disappointment, or hurt, are often the very forces that strip people of self-control. When attacked, the undisciplined man reacts impulsively, scrambling to defend his ego or retaliate to regain control. Yet it is in these impulsive moments that a man becomes weakest. In contrast, the man who controls his emotions doesn't react automatically. He steps back, observes the situation, identifies the rising emotions within, and chooses a response instead of surrendering to instinct. Strength is not in the volume of one's voice or the theatrics of one's actions. True strength lies in the ability to master oneself when provoked. A woman may test him through prolonged silence, provocative remarks, or sudden indifference. In such moments, the unstable man panics, loses direction, and acts without clarity. But the calm man remains centered, unbeasted by emotional traps, and thereby retains his position in the relationship. Emotional control does not mean suppression or denial of feeling. It is a process of observing, understanding, and guiding emotion appropriately. A man strong in spirit does not deny that he feels anger, sadness, or pain. He fully recognizes it, yet does not allow it to dictate his behavior. He may choose to withdraw and reflect, to write out his thoughts, or to remain silent for a time, to avoid rash decisions made in anger. That is emotional intelligence, the ability to manage one's internal world in all circumstances. Another dimension of emotional control is composure in the face of rejection or disagreement. The man lacking this control tends to react negatively when his desires are not met. He may become angry, passive-aggressive, or try to apply pressure to change the other's mind. But the calm man is unaffected by the emotional fluctuations of others. He does not abandon his position just to appease. He listens, he considers, but he holds true to his core values. His stillness in conflict is what makes him trustworthy. In social settings, the emotionally disciplined man commands more respect. He is not swayed by the crowd, nor does he overreact to negative remarks or attitudes. He does not need to retaliate to prove his strength. His serenity and steadiness allow him to navigate situations with maturity, avoiding the regrettable outcomes of impulsive decisions. This not only preserves personal relationships, but also builds credibility and honor in the broader social world. Emotional control also allows a man to maintain focus on long-term goals. When he is not governed by emotion, he is not easily distracted by external turbulence. Whether criticized, rejected, or opposed, he continues on his path without being derailed by temporary instability. It is this consistency that enables him to achieve significant aims, not only in love, but in career and life as a whole. In the end, the man who controls his emotions has no need to prove his strength through spectacle. His presence alone creates a sense of safety, not because he postures, but because others sense he cannot be shaken by anything beyond his control. And that is one of the defining traits of a man who is solid, trustworthy, and deeply compelling. 7. Selective praise. Rare but real. In human interaction, praise is one of the most powerful tools for expressing recognition, encouragement, and building connection. However, like any tool, if praise is overused, mistimed, or lacking sincerity, it quickly loses its effect. Conversely, when used selectively, praise not only leaves a strong impression, but also creates deep and lasting emotional resonance in the one who receives it. Women with heightened emotional sensitivity can clearly distinguish between a compliment born from careful observation and one offered merely to flatter. When a man repeatedly says things like, "You're so beautiful," "You're amazing," or "You're the smartest woman I've ever met," without context or specificity, those words begin to blur. They no longer feel special because they could easily be said to anyone without much thought. The frequent repetition of shallow compliments makes women feel superficially assessed, lacking depth. It gives the impression that the other person isn't truly noticing their unique qualities, but merely using words as a tool to achieve a social goal. On the other hand, when a man rarely gives praise, but each compliment stems from genuine attention and is delivered sincerely, its value becomes immense. Selective praise shows that a man observes, waits for the right moment, and only speaks when it is truly deserved. This reveals not only sensitivity, but also emotional discipline, a quality deeply worthy of respect. When a woman receives praise from someone who rarely expresses emotion, the compliment feels more trustworthy, more authentic, and significantly more meaningful. Beyond timing, the content of the praise also plays a vital role. A meaningful compliment doesn't just comment on appearance, but touches character, values, or behavior. When a man praises a woman for how she handled a difficult situation, for her calm under pressure, or for her kindness toward others, it's more than praise. It's a recognition of inner substance. Such words don't just bring momentary joy, they affirm self-worth and make a woman feel truly seen. Another key element is tone and eye contact when giving praise. A compliment that rests only in language may come off as hollow if not matched with consistent expression. A man of depth uses a calm voice, direct eye contact, and sincere intonation, ensuring the compliment isn't perceived as flattery, but as a genuine reflection born of personal observation. Notably, selective praise retains long-term value. When a woman recalls a particular compliment, delivered at the right time, in the right context, and accurately reflecting who she is, the feeling it evokes can linger for a long time. It becomes a positive emotional imprint that strengthens subconscious connection. In contrast, overly frequent, easily given compliments are quickly forgotten and may even cause discomfort. A compliment doesn't need to be elaborate or poetic. It can be simple, but when it arises from genuine observation and not from a need to impress, it carries far more weight than empty words. For example, rather than saying, "You look great," a comment like, "The way you handled that situation was impressive," brings deeper emotional resonance because it acknowledges not just the external, but the inner self. Finally, selective praise is also a sign of firm personal standards. A man who does not praise lightly often holds high standards, not in a judgmental sense, but in a discerning one. He is not easily swayed by appearances he sees, nor quick to express admiration unless it is rooted in truth. This selectivity, when paired with sincere delivery, makes others feel that when they are praised, they have truly earned it. In essence, praise only fulfills its value when it stems from careful attention, is delivered at the right moment, and expressed in the right manner. A man who controls his emotions, lives with intention, and knows when to speak, turns his praise into a moment worth remembering, not just another forgettable remark. 8. Social gravity. It comes without words. A man's presence can sometimes command influence without any need for introduction or display. It does not come from striking looks or sharp speech, but from a quiet yet undeniable force: social gravity, the ability to naturally draw attention, respect, and trust simply by how one exists in a shared space. Social gravity cannot be built overnight. It is the result of a long process of staying true to personal values, mastering one's behavior, and remaining consistent in conduct. A man with social gravity doesn't need to dominate a meeting or make every decision. But when he speaks, the room listens. When he enters, people notice. It's not imposition. It's a quiet signal of safety, trust, and respect that others give without being asked. In relationships, especially between men and women, women are acutely aware of how a man is perceived by others. They observe how other men treat him, how other women regard him, and how he holds his place in a group. When a man doesn't need to speak to earn respect, doesn't need to prove himself to gain recognition, his presence carries a unique energy, a silent authority that resonates deeply. Social gravity does not come from talking about oneself, boasting of achievements, or highlighting status. On the contrary, it is built through humility, consistency, and the ability to act without seeking attention. A man who works quietly but effectively, who keeps his word, who lives by his principles, is the one others begin to listen to, not because they must, but because they believe his words carry real weight. In social settings, the man with gravity avoids petty arguments and never elevates himself by putting others down. He knows the value of silence at the right time and speaks only to uphold what is just. His self-control and calm problem-solving make him a point of stability, even when he has no desire to be a leader. Women can clearly sense the pull of a man with social gravity. They see that he doesn't try to impress, doesn't need attention, yet always draws the eye. He doesn't perform, but makes others feel alive in his presence. This allure doesn't come from exaggerated body language, but from an inner steadiness reflected in small gestures, in how he listens, walks, and responds to challenge or surprise. A man with social gravity is also unafraid of silence. In conversation, he doesn't feel compelled to fill every pause with words. He's at ease in quiet, and that stillness doesn't create distance. It deepens connection. In a world where most strive to be loud to be noticed, the man who speaks sparingly makes the strongest impression. Importantly, social gravity cannot be faked. A man may mimic someone's tone, dress, or mannerisms, but without inner discipline and a clear moral compass, the illusion soon falls apart. By contrast, when self-control, principle, and character are deeply ingrained, every gesture exudes presence, even in complete silence. Social gravity is also seen in how a man holds his place in a group without needing a title. He does not need a position to be heard, nor authority to be respected. He leads through action, through how he works and how he treats others. Every move has purpose, never excessive, never showy. And that is why people begin to reflect on themselves in his presence, not out of pressure, but from a desire to rise. Ultimately, social gravity does not reside in words, but in presence. A man may say nothing, yet when he's there, others adjust their behavior. When he listens, people feel understood. And when he leaves, the absence isn't of sound, but of the energy that once filled the room. Such presence is not born of luck or charm, but forged through a life of discipline, values, and unwavering direction. 9. Knowing when to walk away. The mark of a principled man. In many life situations, especially relationships, people are often driven by an instinct to hold on, even when the connection no longer brings positive value. This comes from the emotional need for security, the fear of loss, and habits deeply ingrained over time. Yet the ability to walk away at the right moment is a sign of inner maturity and clear evidence of a man's true character. Walking away is not a rash decision, nor a reaction to emotional impulse. It is an intentional act, rooted in a clear understanding of personal boundaries and self-worth. A man of principle does not cling blindly to something just because it was once good. He observes, evaluates, and when he recognizes that the current situation no longer aligns with his life's direction, he leaves, without regret, without blame, and without seeking approval. Knowing when to leave is most apparent in romantic relationships, where emotions often cloud decisive choice. Many men stay in relationships lacking respect, emotional alignment, or filled with control, simply because they fear loneliness or hope the other will change. But the man of strength is different. He understands that true love cannot thrive in imbalance. If he must continually sacrifice, tolerate, and compromise his core values just to maintain his presence, then leaving is not failure, it is wisdom. The strength in walking away lies not in the act itself, but in the man's refusal to let emotions anchor him in a place his reason has already outgrown. He does not seek drama, does not hurt others, and does not make excuses. He simply withdraws, because that withdrawal protects his dignity, mental stability, and life direction. And it is precisely this quiet departure that causes others to reflect, not because he demanded attention, but because his absence carries weight. In romantic dynamics, women can sense clearly who is willing to walk away and who clings out of fear. The man who fears loss acts from insecurity, quick to agree, quick to excuse, and easily swayed by others' emotions. The man who knows when to leave holds his ground, refusing to be swept away. He doesn't issue threats or ultimatums, but he grants no one the liberty to trample his standards unchecked. Another key aspect lies in the silence that follows. A truly mature man does not use departure to manipulate emotions or draw attention. He does not return seeking pity or to test if the other has changed. Once he decides to leave, he continues on his path, carrying his silence as a reflection of his inner quality. And it is this firmness that gives his decision its gravity, not loud, but profound. Beyond romance, knowing when to walk away applies to work, social bonds, and major life choices. When an environment becomes unfit, when a connection brings more harm than good, the principled man does not salvage it at any cost. He does not chase validation or cling to presence to avoid judgment. Instead, he chooses to let go, because he knows not everything that can continue should continue. Walking away at the right time is not abandonment of responsibility. On the contrary, it is the highest form of responsibility toward one's life. Such a man does not live by fleeting emotion or external expectation. He lives by principle, and when that principle is repeatedly violated with no change, he ends the tide gently, yet decisively. In essence, knowing when to walk away is a life skill, a sign of inner maturity, and a measure of true resolve. Not everyone has the courage to part with the familiar, but the one who can let go at the right time is the one preserving the most valuable thing, himself. 10. Living for a mission, not for acceptance. One of the clearest differences between a man with direction and a man who lives merely to be accepted lies in how they shape their lives. One actively pursues a mission. The other passively follows external expectations. When a man lives with a clear mission, every step he takes has purpose. Every action serves a goal greater than himself, and that alone sets him apart, gives him gravity, and makes him irreplaceable. A mission doesn't need to be grand. It may be a personal ideal, a career vision, a path of self-development, or a goal to serve others. In any form, a mission provides a stable internal axis, helping a man stay centered when the world around him turns chaotic. While others change their behavior to gain approval, he stays his course, not out of stubbornness, but because he knows what is essential to him. A man who lives for a mission does not act to please others. He does not alter his life for applause or out of fear of criticism. Each decision is made not to impress or gain acceptance, but to move closer to a long-term goal. This resolve generates a distinct kind of energy, an energy felt by those around him, signaling focus, intention, and a mind untouched by distractions. In relationships, especially with women, the man who lives for a mission exudes a very different kind of magnetism. He does not place a woman at the center of his life. She is not the destination, but a companion on the path. Her presence is treasured, but not required for him to feel whole. When a man continues growing, continues pursuing his ideals with or without someone by his side, that quiet independence, strength, and reliability become unmistakable. Conversely, the man who lives for acceptance often lacks an internal compass. He adapts to the moment, reacts emotionally, and loses himself trying to keep others happy. Without validation, he feels insecure. When rejected, he becomes unmoored. Such men are not only vulnerable to the world, they struggle to earn respect because their presence is not anchored in lasting value. Living for a mission also means a man is willing to sacrifice short-term comfort in pursuit of something greater. He does not delay the hard tasks, reject the challenge, or let fleeting emotions knock him off course. Whether facing solitude, misunderstanding, or failure, he keeps going, not because things are easy, but because he sees meaning in every step of the journey. A clear sign of a man with a mission is his willingness to say no to what doesn't align, even if it means losing immediate connection, affection, or gain. He is not easily swayed by appearances or seduced by temporary promises. When faced with the choice between staying true to his path or adjusting to fit someone else, he chooses the mission, not out of selfishness, but because he understands that a true relationship can only thrive when both people look in the same direction. The magnetism of a man on a mission doesn't come from his words, but from the intentional consistency of his actions. Others see him training when no one is watching, staying disciplined without external rewards, and acting with integrity even when no one praises him. It is this quiet resolve that makes him impossible to ignore, not because he seeks attention, but because his life moves to a rhythm greater than personal desire. Ultimately, the man who lives for a mission is not governed by others' approval or rejection. He does not chase recognition. He pursues something beyond himself. And that is what makes him unshakable, unmanipulable, and irreplaceable. His presence is a silent reminder. Some men do not live to please, but to fulfill a journey, whether anyone joins them or not. What resonated with me most when embracing these principles was the feeling of no longer being controlled by emotions or the expectations of others. I used to be someone who easily compromised, who aimed to please, and who sacrificed personal values just to hold on to acceptance. But when I began applying these principles, controlling emotion, holding boundaries, and living for purpose rather than approval, everything started to shift. I no longer react impulsively to criticism or emotional pressure. Instead, I've learned to observe my own responses before choosing action. I've also let go of much of the need to prove myself in relationships. Rather than trying to be interesting, I focus on being authentic and allow others to perceive that value on their own. When I understood that no one should be the center but myself, I began to prioritize cultivating inner strength by practicing discipline, staying true to principles, and acting each day in alignment with my own goals. You don't have to change everything overnight, but if you choose one thing, like staying silent instead of reacting, or holding a boundary instead of fearing disapproval, you will begin to feel a new kind of freedom, a strength that rises from within, dependent on no one. If you found value in what was shared in this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future content. We're not here to become the most liked person. but to become someone we can respect each day. See you in the next video.